Our focus on Gravitas today will be the India-Pakistan conflict and Pakistan's campaign to internationalize the Kashmir dispute. Has it made any headway in New York? With me in the studio are three very eminent panelists. Dr. W.P.S. Sidhu, he is the non-resident fellow at New York University's Center on International Cooperation. With me is Rick C. Mathews, public service professor at Rockefeller College of Public Affairs and Policy, and Arvin Vohra, he is the vice chair of the Libertarian National Committee. Thank you all for being with us here on Gravitas and here in our New York studio. I want to ask with you, start with you, Dr. Sidhu. What do you make of Pakistan's campaign on Kashmir here at the United Nations?
Well, it's very predictable in many ways. It's an old playbook that Pakistan has always worked with, so there's no surprises there. For them, hyphenation, particularly with India, is in some ways perceived to be much more beneficial than a hyphenation with Afghanistan, which is what they've been with all this time. But on the ground, I think beyond a point, they're not likely to have much traction, and we can already see that even before the speeches of the Prime Minister tomorrow. Primarily because they're not the best, how should I say, champions of human rights anywhere in the world. So from that point of view, I think they're already on, to use a cricket sort of terminology, on a poor wicket.
Right. Many say that this is a wasted opportunity for the Pakistani leadership. On such a platform, in the presence of so many world leaders, Pakistan could have done so much more at a time when its economy is in such a shambles, and yet they only focus on Kashmir. So when Imran Khan and his team, when they go back to Pakistan, do you think they'll have anything to show for it?
Yeah. From my point, I think they'll have something to show. We just don't know what it's going to be. I think that the talks, as they talk tomorrow, I think the side talks here, while they're here this week, they're going to go back with something. They're going to keep their same playbook, or they're going to modify it in some way. But very definitely, they're going to feel the world's eyes on them. And I think that's very critical at this point with regards to the stability of the region and for this to hopefully come to some sort of a resolution.
And what Pakistan is really hoping for is intervention from the world, especially from the US. And Imran Khan met the US president a couple of months back, and he got him to say that I'll be happy to mediate or help, which Donald Trump tends to say all the time. But even though he has offered mediation and has been told in so many words that it would not be required, where does America really stand on this? And if they are in the war against terrorism, then why are they not fighting the war against Pakistani terrorism?
Kashmir is an area that could be an economic superpower. It could be to India what Hong Kong was to China. The problem is right now, instead of being hampered by the incompetence of one government, they're being hampered by the incompetence of two or arguably three governments, if you include China's influence. The reason that the United States has correctly not gotten as involved is because the American people have that sense that Kashmir could be so much more than just some piece of Indian mismanaged territory or some piece of Pakistani mismanaged territory. This is a place that has the pure waters you need for electronics productions, the raw materials you need for everything. It could be incredible, and it's being hampered by the incompetence of two governments. The solution for Kashmir is that it should be its own state in the way that Hong Kong was its own superpower when it was separate from China.
Kashmir is a part of India. I am sorry, I disagree with you. Do you think that's how it should be? Incompetence of two states is not...
Well, there are different approaches that one could follow in terms of, to one element, I think greater autonomy for the states, not just Kashmir, but other states as well. That may have been another way to go. So, for example, everybody focuses on Article 370, which is understandable, but there's also Article 371, which actually allows for other states to have a similar status as Jammu and Kashmir. And frankly, I think it's that's not necessarily, would not have been a bad way to go either. Because in a way, you're actually elevating other states up to the level of Jammu and Kashmir. So you're in a way still kind of bringing Jammu and Kashmir on par with the other states, right? Without necessarily taking things away, which gives a very different kind of connotation aspect to that as well. But again, as you very rightly pointed out, there is the element of the Pakistan administered or Pakistan occupied or Azad Kashmir element of it as well. And you cannot really think of Jammu and Kashmir as one until the two sides are together.
The government of India said that Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and that's the term I'll stick with, not Azad Kashmir, remains Indian territory, and they will physically at some point, Jaishankar said, the foreign minister, that India will take control of it. But, you know, Rick, we seem to be in a catch-22 situation here. India says there will be no talks until Pakistan ceases support to terror. And Pakistan says there is no terror from our side. These are people from Kashmir who are revolting against the state, and remains in denial, and there's dossiers being exchanged and so on and so forth. But you cannot wish each other away. The fact is that geography has mandated that India and Pakistan share a border. So what is the solution, or what is the future of this conflict?
Well, you're very astute in your observation about that. I mean, you can't work together unless you talk together and find some common ground. And when you think about it, we look at the world looks at this whole area. Yeah, there's terrorism around the area. There's no question about it. And frankly, it doesn't really matter from my perspective who's behind it. It's still terrorism, and it has to stop. When we start looking at that, nobody wants to own the terrorist. Pakistan says, oh, it's not ours. Other people say it's not ours.
And yet the Pakistani state asked the United Nations to allow Hafiz Saeed to get access to its bank account.
We look at that stuff too. And I think, so sometimes people remember their words are not always what their actions are. We have to find a way in the world to get that region to talk to each other and to figure out how to begin to talk through these differences without, I was going to say something I probably shouldn't say publicly, but irritating everybody. And two neighbors have got to figure out a way to get along. And I've used this analogy a lot. You have two neighbors, don't like each other, but you're neighbors. We share a common area. We share common borders. We share people because they're all in our area. We could share in economies. I mean, it's a lot of things we could share. But I think that we've tended in that region not to at this point.
I think that's the note on which this government, this Prime Minister started. When he was going to take oath, he invited Nawaz Sharif, the then Prime Minister of Pakistan, and I think the idea was to make a fresh start, but then we saw the attacks and things went downhill since then. So while there might be the desire and the political will as well to try and make things work, there are certain powers and vested interests which wouldn't allow that.
I just want to pick up on a couple of very interesting points that Rick made. It's absolutely correct that I think, you know, the rhetoric needs to be toned down, and I think both sides need to contribute towards that in many ways. But I would differ slightly in saying that it's not necessarily necessary or essential that neighbors are always living together in harmony. It's ideal. That would be the perfect solution anywhere in the world. But, you know, for example, if you look here at us in the US and Cuba, I mean, there's been no progress and there's not likely to be a progress, even though the Cubans are not carrying out terrorist attacks at the moment in the United States. It's not likely to happen. And by that same logic, I think it does matter who is behind those attacks. Because, for example, in the, here in the US, we're very conscious of the fact that it doesn't matter who's pulling the trigger, even if the ideology which is leading to that person pulling the trigger is coming from a particular way. We're concerned about that country and that ideology. And I think the same parity, whether it's somebody from Kashmir or within Kashmir who's pulling the trigger or blowing up a bomb, the fact that the ideology is coming from somewhere else is the problem.
But in the US, what you actually see is those same people. You see people from India, people from Pakistan, who are good friends here. If you don't have governments riling them up over these ancient old disputes that are half political, half religious, half economic, I mean, there's more halves than you would even get into a whole. You see that those same people taken out of that toxic environment created by their governments here are suddenly best of friends. So I think there's a lot to be said for that.